Great. I'll get started then. Today we're going to go over attributes. And people go, attributes, what the heck is that? And one of the other ways to think about attributes is user-defined fields. And they are everywhere in the program. And if you need a user-defined field, is another way to describe it. Why did I not call it user-defined field? Because we have a single field called user-defined, sort actually. So we didn't want to confuse that. And the idea was attributes is maybe multiple things that describe something. And so that's where we got the word attributes from. But we're trying to do something where every different customer needs an additional field. It's amazing. Every time we go out and talk to a customer, they're like, so where do I put the volatile organic compound number or the VOC number? And I'm like, oh, we don't have a field for that, but we could create one using an attribute. So there's always lots of different opportunities. It gives us the ability to create a user-defined field without rewriting the program. Because it's expensive. We've had some of you customers say, hey, I need this field added, and we charge you a couple $100 to add a single field. So it gives some flexibility as well. So it better meets your needs if you can add some things that make sense to you or the wording is more specific to you. These fields can be available in many different modules and on many different records. So there can be used across the board, and that's one of these kind of topics like today that we're talking about. It doesn't impact just the manufacturing module or just the sales order module. We're looking at it, this touches on areas through the entire program. And so it's going to hit multiple modules that we're going to go over today. One of the features that adding an attribute field does is you can actually add it to the list screen. So many of our screens, you go to a list screen first before you go to the individual screen. We give you the ability to sort and search and things like that. And we also can add them to a crystal report from that standpoint. The history of it, we started out, and I'll go into the program real quick. We went in here and people started asking for different fields. And so we went over here, we added these fields up here, the text fields. And so we had text field 1, 2, 3, and 4, and we had numeric fields 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then that wasn't enough. We even added a user-defined date field because people were like, and these were specific because we assigned what type of a field it was so that we could force it. So is it a number or is it text? And so text is words, a string of words, letters and numbers combined, that type of thing. Where a number, numeric value, it can be with decimal places, but it is specifically just a number value that is typed in there as well. So we started out with these 4 fields here of each type, and then we later added the date field, and that wasn't enough. And so one of our customers said, I've got 23 different fields that I need you to add. And it was like, oh my gosh, that's a lot to add. So then we came up with this attribute list here, and we call them here global attributes for the item screen. And so these, we made it so you could have an unlimited long list of them. And you could change the sort order. And the trick behind the scenes from the geek out side of me is all of these values here are stored as a text field. So if I were to look at the actual structure of this, it is what the field is, what the value is, and behind the scenes, when you set it up, you tell me whether it's a string, which is words, letters, a number, can be both integer or floating point type thing. We call these Boolean in the programming world. They're true or false. And then later on, we added another one called drop down, and I'll get into that a little bit more detail. But basically, when you're in this screen here, you don't get to edit these. You don't get to edit the type. You only get to edit the value in the middle here. So I can add a different number, like with a string, it can be a letter with an X and 12. So it's 123 by 12 or something like that. Where if it's a number, it's a thickness, okay, that's 0.125 or eighth of an inch. True or false, you can see it changes to a checkbox. So it's either true or false from that standpoint. So let me go into how we set up an attribute. So we're going to cheat and use attribute. And inventory item attributes were our first one because of these CNC parameters. And again, that user, when we added them for them, it gave them the ability to add, it was at least 20 different fields here. And this is the way we defined it here. It's an unlimited number of items or fields that you could add. So this is our mode form as we normally do. So you can go into mode, turn mode on. Note that you can change the sort order, and so that's the order that they're going to be displayed. When we're choosing it, we have to set what type it is, and then the drop down is. There is an additional box here. It's called Show on List. That I'll show you that in just a minute. And then there's a filter. I'm going to have Daniel explain this one in a minute too. But let's add a new one. So I'm just going to add it to the bottom of the list. I'm going to specify the sort order for that it's that. And I'm going to choose the VOC example and say because that's a big deal on the environmental things. And that's usually a number type of scenario. And then in this case, I'm going to choose the box that is show on list. And then I'm going to go ahead and say, okay. When I hit the OK, it says, do I want to add the attribute to all items? Now, depending on how many items you have, this may take a bit because maybe you have 30,000 items. So if you say, okay, that's going to take a couple minutes to add it. So I don't have many items in this example. So it comes out pretty quickly. So if I look at my items list, I don't see VOC added, but notice how these other ones are already here. But if I close this form and I come back and I reopen the items list and I scroll over here, now I've got VOC was added to the list. You normally have to resize these because they want to take up a large width because it's a string box. So you want to add it, format it, and come back here and do the old save screen just so that you have it the width that you want. But now I can come into this particular item, go into attributes, and I can fill in a number here. And then I okay that, and now that is available on the main list. We can make use of our searching functions, where I can search for that number and try to find it in the list, and it will find it in the VOC column. You can also do the old sorting up and down, or grouping type of function with these fields as well. So that's what it means when it talks about add to the list is, do I want to see it not just in the individual item, what we talk about, where we see it here, where I can add the information, but I want to display it on the list as well. Now, another option here to choose from is a drop-down list. So let's go back to under the attributes. I go to the other menu because it's a setup item, an item attributes. And then I'm going to go to one of the existing ones that was a drop-down list. And so a drop-down test, good name for it, isn't it? Very specific. And if I hit the mode form, it gives me a box here where I can type in first, second, third, and I can add an additional ones. And I'm basically making my choices This is really handy when you're setting up data structure, is to sometimes, instead of letting them type in just a string where somebody can type in whatever they want, if you give them definite choices, the data is cleaner and it's much more useful. So from that standpoint, I'm going to OK this, and I'm going to say OK. And I'm going to come back into this item, and I can go to an attribute, and I'm going to go to a drop-down test, and now I can see my first, second, third, fourth, and that can be anything. A drop-down option is more of a string. It could be a number, but it's really more meant to be words that you're choosing. So that's one option when you're picking a data type. It's different than a string, because a string you just type it in, where if you pick drop down, it is a string, but you choose it from a list that you've set up. So another option that we gave a specific customer, Daniel, I'll let you talk about this, but the filter.
Sure. So the filter is, some customers said, hey, we've got a long list of attributes we need to add for these types, and then a different long list of attributes we need to add for these types. And so what we gave them was a filter option, and you can combine these. So if by default the filter is set to all, or there is no filter, then it'll just add all your attributes. But if you choose a filter and then you right click and hit add all missing, it'll only add the ones that are for that filter. And so you can have filters or not have filters. That's up to you. This is useful for grouping types of attributes. So one example is we had a customer that when it's an actuator product, they wanted to add all their actuator specs. But if it's an electric motor, they wanted to add all the electric motor specs. And these are, maybe 20 or 30 different specs. They didn't want to have to add all of them and then selectively delete which ones. This is a way to group them. And that's set up back on the attribute itself. So under item attributes, there's a little filter box off to the far right. And if you leave that blank, it'll just be on all items. But if you set a filter, it only adds it if it's set to that filter. So your filters are created under defaults, attribute filters at the top. So you first create a filter, and then you can later assign it. Next one to the bottom, yeah.
Now, we only currently use this on the item table, but we've built this so that we can expand it to other places. So if you think of some place that, boy, that'd be nice to use in the sales order or in some other record, let us know. That's something we could add. But we built the structure so we can make it across multiple places. Well, thanks, Daniel. Mm-hmm. So we went from this history of adding a few to now we can add a lot. And we've gone over just some of the different ways to set them up. You can set the order, describe what it is, the different data types, whether it shows on a list or the filter. Purpose is across the board. It's a lot of different things we can do, but organizing, grouping, missing fields, as we talked about, could be very specific, adding to reports, and criteria for specific functions. Now, on the criteria for specific functions, I'm going to show you something that it doesn't necessarily get called an attribute, but it basically is of the same structure. So back to our item and looking at a purchased item, we can go across here to inspect. And this inspect here, it's pretty much the same structure as an attribute that you can list and put in information from a tolerance or a tool and the method. This is very similar, and we won't go into great deal with this, but the inspect is basically a method of doing attributes. And it's just basically we tried to focus this list of attributes that you would inspect a part to, if you kind of can add those two words together. So that's one specific example. Another example, we do it under sales orders, and that is contract review. So if we're into a new order, you'll see it even say the word attribute here for its contract review. Again, we tried to focus the use of these attributes for doing ISO or other requirements that say, hey, we need to do a contract review. Well, you get to define for me a list of these attributes that you need to do. There's a few additional fields, whether it's required, is it per line, who's the process owner. So there's a few more fields than a straight pure attribute, but it's the same concept that you get to define this list and you get to add it and then go through it. So that's kind of more specific. So we have it in a few places. Contract review, revision control is another one of those that is very specific to that. It's like a attribute. And we have just generic attributes from this point as well. So I've got to add a customer. And so they can be something that's very specific to the item. So in this case, this is your generic attribute. So just in sales order alone, you have multiple things that are like attributes. Here's the generic attributes. You can have the contract review and revision control. Very similar, but they're narrowed down in scope. So we have these attributes across the board in many places in the program. Again, that it can add it to the list. And just to give you a flavor for it, I have a list here. This is everywhere that we can use attributes, from accounts receivable, invoice, audit records, calibration. I mean, this is a huge list. We talked about the sales order, change control, contract review, customers and vendors. That's another great spot where we give you attributes, and it's a good way to organize customers, even sales, contact attributes. Any of the quality modules, almost all of those have it, and that was a great way for us to go, I don't know what all the boxes you want to look at when you're doing a quality record. So I'm going to give you the ability to add as many of these kind of user-defined fields as you so choose in our quality records. So many places across the program, you'll get an opportunity to use these. Again, it's usually per module, and then you assign it to the per record, and you pick the data specific type, whether it's string, number, that type of thing. And we have some additional options, like we talked about the filter, and there's a few other that are specific to a specific module. You can use them all over it, and this is the part where we'll suggest it, but it's almost better for you to kind of come up with these things. I mean, you think about the contract review, really that's creating a checklist for that sales order to go through. So that's one function. Sometimes it's just capturing information on a record where we want to put that data into the database, link it to a specific item. The quality, we talked about it across the board, that it can be specific to an industry, or you can use it to customize fields or forms. And then inventory, we talked about in great potential. So I guess I'd like to field some questions. If people have them, I can show on the screen. Daniel, any other thoughts that you'd like to add?
One thing was that on the item attribute itself, and there is a memo field. They don't all have this, usually just the value, but items does give you a memo in case you have a much longer note. You can paste as much data as you want in there. I was wondering, Claire, if you can show them the attributes at the top. Where did those come from on the item type? Can you show them how the item type attributes work?
The titles here?
Yeah.
Okay. So again, these original item type attributes, if you go to each of the individual item types, if you go into the individual record, we can go to the attributes tab, and we can have different titles for these different things like wall thickness. This is on tubing. Maybe we want to call it, surface, something where these can be now, it will dynamically change the title that when we do this, if I go to an item that belongs to metal tubing, so, so now when I go to the attributes, where I just typed the word surface in, now that shows up as the title. And so what we're trying to do in this area is for different types, you might use these fields differently. So you don't use them across the board for every type the same way. So you can really have these being different things based on what type of the item it is. And so that's where these titles, so they default to like here where it says attribute text 3. But if I go in back into that metal tubing, go to the attributes and it's attribute text 3, and I change this to I add the title here. Once I come back in and open up that field again, go to the attributes, now it's added the word prime rather than just the generic title. And that makes it a lot easier for your users to get the right information in the right box from that standpoint.
A good example of how I saw this used once was we have a steel a company, oil field company that used a lot of steel, and on their steel item types, they would put the grade of the metal and the thickness and the width and the length. And because they did that on their items, we were able to write a utility to where anytime their costs change per pound on steel, rather than have to go through every single part and do an update, we wrote it to calculate the weight and multiply it out and dynamically update thousands of items all at once, because based on these attributes. So you can do lots of things like that. You could, I've seen them used all kinds of crazy ways. And they're throughout the whole program, like you said, purchasing, sales, receivables, non-conformances. So I thought it was a really good solution, a way to put the power in the customer's hands to have as many of your own custom fields as you want. Use them in different ways.
And it gives some flexibility in how they're used. You'll find all the setup screens under the other. So receivables, other. So here, just for the module for receivables, there's customer attributes, sales contact attributes, invoice attributes, so there's multiple just for this one module, different record types on this. And so like here's sales contact attributes. So even if we're using our contact list under receivables, you're allowed to add custom fields like, do they want to receive a catalog? Do we need to email it? Do we use the contract alternate address or not? How many catalogs do we send them? So very specific fields to organizing your information, in this case for the sales contacts from that point.
I noticed vendors is a good one too. Like we had, they're often wanting to add all these insurance attributes to the vendor. Do they have insurance, or when was the last time we did a survey on them, or these different. We've added some other functionality for some of those, but yeah, there's all kinds of creative ways to use these.
Yeah, and just even if it's like these things like shipping hours or different types of freight information or things like that, you can put all kinds of different things, minimum order amounts, fields just that you want to see. So it's just really handy, just a way to organize it. And again, they're unlimited, but therefore you how to use it.
Yeah. The VOC one is a great example too, because there's a lot of companies that have to do reporting at end of year on how many
Right.
total VOCs they did that year. That, well, once you make it a data point in the program, hey, now we can do queries on it. We can do reporting on it and give you that information. Yeah.
So a little shorter today. Tammy, did you have any questions for us? Must not be. She's
No,
muted.
I actually I actually was muted. Um, no, I'm not sure I could actually
Okay.
add attributes yet. I kind of try to follow you through the ERP system that we have, but
Right.
I actually learned some things like when I was missing my attributes on some items and I just right clicked and add
At all.
missing. Yep, I
Mm-hmm.
knew. I saw where our filter says all, so all the attributes were added, and I saw where you guys put that in there. Um, but then I followed you guys and saw, so I learned some things in there,
Okay.
and saw why things happened, but not sure if I could actually add what I want in places just yet.
Sure. Okay. Well, again, we encourage people to try things, and it's our best. So we'll look at another topic next month. I really appreciate you joining us, Tammy, and everybody that listens to it recorded. Thanks for your attention, and feel free to let us know if you have additional questions. Thank you.
Thank
And
you guys.
Tammy, I can get with you, connect one-on-one if you need any assistance getting one added or something specific you want to try to do. Let me know if you get stuck.
Okay, I think that's interesting. I didn't know we could attach it to just items, that we could do the contracts and the sales and everything.
Oh yeah. Now you're gonna be running amok, putting
Now
them
I'm going to be
everywhere.
playing. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to cut us off. Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you both.
Okay. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.